Chapter 1. As far as Tabitha was concerned, the only thing magical about Christmas was the enjoyment of watching the snow falling while eating decadent food. And technically, that could be done any time through December or January. Her baby sister's voice broke through her Christmas tree musings. "Hey Tabitha. Can you pass my water bottle, please?" Tabitha looked from her sister to the pink plastic bottle she coveted, and stifled the urge to laugh. There were only 3 feet between them, but because her sister's stomach was so swollen with twins she couldn't even get to her own feet without help, Tabitha wasn't about to say no to her request. "Drink up." She grabbed the bottle and tossed it to her sister, who despite the chilly temperatures outside looked rosy red in the cheeks. Samantha chugged back the water, and Tabitha's heart fluttered with happiness as she smiled at the picture her sister made. Like Mother Earth or a Buddha. She hadn't decided which was more appropriate. "Sam, seriously. How are you going to organize Christmas dinner for 20 people in your state? You know you were crazy for offering. Actually, I take that back. You are nuts for insisting that you throw Christmas dinner for the whole family this year." Her sister laughed aloud. "Yeah, I know. But it's the last time we'll be in Seattle for a long while, and I wanted to make it special." "Doesn't mean you have to host it." Tabitha huffed out. Samantha's husband had been offered a huge promotion by his employer, and the pair of them had soon realized they'd be stupid not to jump at the opportunity. It would mean more money, more stability, and more sunshine. The only catch was, of course, that it meant a 5-year commitment to a company in another state, a 6-hour flight away. Since she'd found out Samantha was moving, Tabitha had been working extremely hard to ignore the twang of pain in her chest that she experienced every time she thought about her sister leaving. Samantha sighed heavily. "Yeah, I know I could have let you or one of the cousins take over, but I really wanted to. And you know, if I'm lucky, the twins will come a few weeks early, and they'll be here to celebrate Christmas with us." Tabitha choked on her laugh. What a strange hope her sister was pinning her Christmas plans on. "That's seriously what you want? Then you'll be so sleep-deprived you won't be able to see straight, and we'll be having sweet potato casserole for dinner, because you know that's all Mom's bringing this year." After several decades of their mother hosting every Thanksgiving and Christmas event for their whole family, she'd given up the honor to the next generation. This was their first year of doing it all, and Tabitha could already see that they were destined to fail. "Don't be such a Scrooge. You know I'll be high on love and Christmas magic. You'll see." Samantha grinned at her, then winced as she shifted in her chair. Tabitha stood up and collected the empty plates from the table. "Christmas magic, my ass." Samantha scowled at her, but she didn't care. She just went about her business, cleaning up after her elephant-sized sister and doing the dishes from this morning. This pregnancy had been a lot harder on Samantha than she wanted to admit, and Tabitha couldn't wait for those babies to make their exit so she'd get her lively, happy sister back. She put away the milk that had been left out and noticed the twins' ultrasound pictures magnetically stuck to the fridge. The smudges of black and white still looked so alien to her. A baby. 2 babies. Oh, how she wanted some of her own. At 31, her biological clock had begun doing some serious ticking. So loudly, in fact, she could feel the tug on her ovaries every time her sister's husband brought home some new toy or trinket for his impending offspring. She shook her head at the thought of John. He was such a big softy, she kind of adored him for how much he loved her sister. There was some heaving and groaning in the family room, and Tabitha hurried back. "What's wrong?" "Toilet time," Samantha said, putting her arms out for assistance. Tabitha reached out and pulled her sister to her feet. "What do you do when no one's around to help you up?" Samantha, now on her feet, looking twice as big as when she was sitting down, put both hands on her lower back and began waddling to the bathroom. "Oh, it's not a pretty sight, and to be honest, most of the time I just make sure that I don't sit down." That was not a comforting thought. Tabitha sighed as she watched her sister disappear down the hallway. If she didn't work so many shifts at the hospital, she could be around more to help. But with her mortgage as high as it was after her asshole ex-husband left her, she just couldn't afford to work any less. A ripple of anger made her clench her back teeth at the mere thought of her ex. Such a narcissist. She'd been sucked in by his charming smile and false promises far too easily. She was ashamed of herself, actually. But he'd moved on to greener pastures, and had to hook up with a wealthy ophthalmologist on the other side of the city. Her job, nursing the sick and injured, had never been glamorous enough for him. And neither had she. Not pretty enough, not skinny enough, never enough. So when he'd followed his dick to some pretty blonde who fulfilled all his dreams of what he deserved in life, she'd filed for divorce, taken out a loan to buy him out of the house, and had been working her butt off ever since. So what are you making for Christmas? You haven't told me yet, and I have to start organizing the menu, Samantha asked as she waddled back into the room. Whatever you're missing. I can do salads, turkey, a dessert or two. And she'd do the decorating, the tree and the cleanup beforehand and after if necessary. Anything to keep her sister as relaxed as possible. A salad, your broccoli rice casserole please, and a dessert would be great. I'm doing the turkey, Samantha said, happily stroking her belly in a soothing rhythm. Okay. Tabitha checked her watch and groaned at the time. Late as always. I better go. My shift starts in half an hour. She leaned down and Samantha kissed her on the cheek. Go. I have a doctor's appointment in a few hours I'd better start getting ready for. Thank you so much for coming by. I appreciate the company and the help. Tabitha turned to walk away but stopped herself and moved back to rub her sister's belly gently. 32 weeks down, hopefully not more than 4 to go. You two need to come out soon so I can meet you. There was a distinct shift and tug of flesh beneath her hands as her niece or nephew kicked out at her. I hope they do too, then you'll get to see them before we leave. Yep. Ouch. There's that horrible heart tug again. You better have a spare bedroom for me to crash in, Sam, Tabitha called out as she moved towards the front door. You know I'll be there every other weekend, whenever I have a few days off in a row. Yeah, I know. And I can't wait for you to come visit. Her sister waved her off with a smile. Tabitha pulled on her coat and ran out the door to her car, the cold air making her skin tingle and reminding her to keep wearing 5 layers of clothing. They'd always been super close, Sam and herself. Born only 18 months apart, worst enemies through teenage years, and now each other's best friend. Tabitha knew that she couldn't continue to ignore the fact that her rock was leaving her. Her only sister. The woman who'd given up every weekend for months, coaxing Tabitha through the rigors of a painful divorce and even worse, true heartbreak. Her sister now had the opportunity to travel, see new things, and support her wonderful husband in the process. Not to mention the salary he'd be on meant they could pay off the house they'd bought, and Sam could stay at home with the twins for years if she chose to. Yes, her sister had done the right thing in marrying John Tennyson. There had been times when Tabitha had been ready to write off the entire male race as worthless, but then Sam would hold up her husband as an example and Tabitha's case would fall to shit. Simple fact. Some men were assholes and some were not. And the same could be said for women. Tabitha turned over her ignition and listened to her old car fight the cold and try to start. It stuttered a few times but got there in the end. A smile lifted her lips. Old Faithful. With a 4-bedroom home to look after and a mortgage that 2 people would struggle to pay for, a new car was well into the future for her. But she hadn't lost faith, not quite yet, that the man she was meant to have children with was still out there. Hopefully he was somewhere thinking the exact same thing. Dr. Noah O'Grady was laser-focused on the task in front of him. I can see the head, Karina, you're doing great. Just one more push and your baby will be here. His patient's sweat-covered face creased up some more as she heaved her tired body over the finish line. The baby's head crowned and the shoulders turned beautifully, then the baby slipped free of the mother's body and Noah caught her with both hands. He did a quick check of both vitals and color. The baby cried with a healthy enthusiasm, still covered in vernix and blood. Perfect. What is it? The mother asked, peering over the white cloth they had draped over her knees. Noah wrapped the baby in a thin blanket and tied off the umbilical cord. This was the second girl for the shift. He delivered 3 boys yesterday. You have a healthy baby girl. He laid the baby in her mother's arms and accepted the stiff handshake from the father, whose eyes were understandably filled with tears. The parents cooed around their new miracle, and Noah instructed one of the interns to do post-care ops. Congratulations, you two. I've got to head over to my office, but I'll be back a little later to check how everyone's doing. He had a mother expecting twins in his office at the other end of the obstetrical unit, and a full book all day. As he did every day. Thank you so much, Dr. O'Grady. He smiled at the new parents and opened the hospital room door. You're very welcome, Karina, James. Congratulations again. Mrs. Tennyson is waiting for you, Dr. O'Grady. His nurse handed him a file and accompanied him down the hallway, to the entrance of the medical office suites. "How late am I running today?" "Oh, only an hour or so." He chuckled at her response and moved back into his office, pulling off his scrub top and replacing it with a clean one. Grabbing his lab coat, he headed for the exam room across the hall. "So sorry for the delay, Mrs. Tennyson, but I had a baby girl who would just not wait." A cynical thought crossed his mind as he glanced at his watch. He needed to schedule more C-sections like so many of his other colleagues. They kept their deliveries on weekends and their office hours during the week. It was so much more efficient than the way he did it. "Oh, not a problem, Dr. O'Grady. You know I'd wait all day to see you." The heavily pregnant woman gave him her sunny smile, and he got another reminder of why he was always running late. It was because he supported his patients in their chosen birth plan, and that would always mean he'd be overbooked and running from hospital to office. And it didn't matter. It's what his patients wanted, and it was what they paid for. And it was the care he prized above all other things. He walked into his room and sat down in his leather chair. "How are you feeling, Samantha?" The woman opposite him gave him a shaky smile. "Oh, I'm very well. As big as a house, as you can see, but overall very well." She began grinning a little too much for some reason, and he probed further. "All right, well, what can I help you with today then?" She rubbed her belly round and round too quickly to be soothing. "I'm a little concerned about how big I'm getting." He frowned. "Why, has your husband said something?" He hated men who criticized their wives for the weight they put on through their pregnancies. In the past, he'd taken them into the corridor and given them as stern a dressing down as he dared. It was hard enough for women to balance everything a woman had to, in a demanding world, without dealing with a man who had no idea what she was going through. It frustrated him to tears. "Oh no. John is wonderful. It's me." That seemed like a truthful answer, although he notated an upside-down star on her private file for his future observations. "Samantha, most women lose their baby weight in the first 12 months after the baby is born. That's nothing to worry about. Especially if you breastfeed." She shook her head. "Oh no. Honestly, it's not that. My husband would love me if I was 50 pounds heavier or lighter. And I don't really care about my clothes or anything like that." Well, he was out of ideas. Then what is it? She chewed on her lips and shifted in her chair. "I'm just so uncomfortable. I can't get up off my couch by myself. I can barely waddle to the toilet some days. There's no way I can do my own laundry or clean. I'm totally useless and I really hate it. Especially with Christmas coming. I'll never be able to cook or organize the day how I would have any other time." Noah sat back in his chair. December was already here. Damn. Part of his brain had forgotten how far into the year they were. Women did this to him every year. No one wanted to give birth on Christmas Day, and they often wanted to manipulate their due dates to avoid it. He checked his paperwork. "Your babies aren't due until January 7th, although few twin pregnancies go further than 38 weeks. Which would land her right on Christmas Day." Now he understood her concern. "Okay, Samantha. Look, you came to me because you said you wanted as natural a birth as possible, so I feel it's my duty to tell you that if you're asking for an induction, your chances of achieving a natural birth are significantly reduced." She frowned. "Which of course is still totally acceptable. As a twin pregnancy, and therefore a higher risk pregnancy, we could book you in for a C-section anytime after 36 weeks. The babies would be small, but they would be healthy." Her face scrunched up in disfavor. Would they need to stay in the special unit at 36 weeks? He considered the last few cases he'd had. "About half the time I find they need to stay here for a few days, but not much longer than that. Every case is different." She hugged her belly tighter. "I really don't want to be induced, nor do I want a C-section. But I'm not sure how much longer I can stay pregnant. I can't sleep, I'm struggling doing everything at home, and Christmas is stressing me out so much." Noah relaxed into his chair and took a breath. Samantha needed someone to take the pressure off her, and if no one in her family had done it already, then he'd happily do so. "Well, you have to realize, I think, that Christmas might need to be a small affair this year, Samantha. Here are your options. If the babies come on time in January, which is unlikely, You'll be so big by December 25th you won't be able to do Christmas as you would normally anyway. If we induce you early, say in 2 weeks, the likelihood of a C-section is very high, and if we do a C-section you won't be lifting or driving for 6 weeks. So in all cases, I think you need to forget about Christmas and focus on your own health. Your babies. Tears slipped down her cheeks and Noah pushed the tissue box across his desk. I don't mean to upset you, Samantha, but my primary concern is your health, both mental and physical. I will support you in any way that I can, but I think we need to work around your body and your beautiful babies. Not December 25th. Yes, doctor. She hiccuped as she wiped away the tears rolling down her cheeks. He stood up. Now let's get you on the table and check out these babies. He helped his patient to get comfortable his medical bed, and rolled over the sonogram machine that would project the baby's heartbeats into the room. It would reassure her that her children were the only important thing in this world, and that's what she needed to be focusing on. Not Christmas Day. Samantha began to smile and laugh as her babies moved beneath his hands and he focused on the job at hand. Stifling the sigh that rose was the hardest part of his day, as he realized Christmas craziness had started and his usually packed schedule was about to get worse. Chapter 2. A message from Samantha came through while Tabitha was working, and she punched in the return call as soon as she was off the clock. Sam picked up and Tabitha jumped straight in. Are you okay? What's wrong? Her sister's happy laugh sounded at the end of the line. Nothing's wrong. Relax. Tabitha did, leaning back on her locker. Oh good. What's up then? Her sister didn't usually message her to say, call me when you're finished work. I think you were right. She chuckled. About what? Because there were too many things Samantha could be referring to. About Christmas. It's too much work for me to organize the whole day at my house, so I was wondering. Tabitha jumped in, if I'd do it at mine, please? Absolutely. Not a problem. Actually, it was kind of a major problem. She had no money to buy decorations or extra food, but she had a credit card she could use in emergencies, and this sounded like an emergency. Oh, thank you so much, Tabitha. I really appreciate it. Her sister sounded so much more relaxed, and a happy sigh floated through the phone. But Tabitha was curious. Samantha had been so set on doing Christmas herself only this morning. What changed your mind? Oh, my doctor. He didn't like me being stressed about Christmas, and timing of the baby's delivery and other things. He told me to just focus on the twins and forget about everything else. So it's very possible I'll be going into labor on Christmas Day, but as long as you can deal with that, then we're all good. Relief flowed through her like cleansing rain. Of course I can deal with that. I'm so happy right now, Sam, because you know he's right. Your health and the baby's health is the only focus now. You know me, I'd be happy to skip Christmas completely this year. Tabitha. Yeah, I know. Tabitha rolled her eyes. She'd been ready to give up on life completely when her ex had left her. But she knew how important these events were to her sister. I'll have to thank this doctor of yours for bringing you to your senses. Well, actually, that would be kind of great. It's getting harder for me to drive, and with John working so much, I'd love a lift to my appointment next week. No problem. Just shoot me the details and I'll make sure I free up the time if I need to. She'd covered enough shifts at work, she was sure she could pull in a favor if necessary. I will. Oh, and I gave John your bank details, and he transferred $500 to cover the Christmas decorations and food and alcohol and stuff. If you need more, can you let me know? Already? She hadn't even said yes yet. No. You can't do that. If I'm throwing Christmas, I'll get all that stuff. Yeah, you'll need to buy it all. I'm sorry I haven't been able to do any shopping. But? Sweetie, stop. Honestly, you're going to have to do all the cleaning, the setup, the cooking. The least we can do is contribute to the cost, and thanks to John's new job, we have the money. Tabitha blew out a heavy sigh. That was logic she found hard to refute. Even with the money, she'd still have to do a hell of a lot of work, and if nothing else, they were being super generous because they were the best people ever. Okay. But no Christmas presents this year. Yeah, of course. Sam agreed. Far too quickly. Sam? What was the bet? Her sister had already got everyone's gifts. I need to go, Tabby. See you at my house over the weekend? Yeah, of course. And send me the details for your appointment next week. Will do. Thank you.
1 week later. A knock on his office door woke Noah out of his doze. Come in. His receptionist stuck her head in. Your next appointment is here, doctor. Can I get you anything? A caffeine IV? Yes, coffee please. Thanks, Cheryl. Cheryl fully opened the door and ushered in his next patient, and went off for his legal stimulant. He'd had a rough couple of days and nights, and sleep had been very thin on the ground. Samantha, please have a seat. His patient waddled in, her gait indicating that one of her twins' heads had descended into her pelvis. A very positive development. Oh, hi, Dr. O'Grady. My sister's here with me. Do you mind if she comes in too? Of course not. Noah waved in the air, indicating she should bring in whomever she wanted. A support person was always encouraged in his offices. A woman walked through the door and smiled at him, the beauty of her face striking him low in the gut like a punch. Tabitha, this is Dr. O'Grady. Tabitha, the blonde-haired angel, stepped up to his desk and extended her hand. It's so nice to meet you, doctor. Noah, please, he managed to say as he stood up and shook her hand, his mouth running dry as the blood in his body pumped south. She was so beautiful, in all the ways he loved in a woman. Full mouth, happy smile, bright eyes. And with perfect skin that made him want to run his hands all over her and luxuriate in its softness. Oh, thank you, Noah. She pulled her hand away and helped her sister settle in the chair, her gaze dropping away as though embarrassed. They all sat down and he took the cup of coffee Cheryl brought in for him, focusing on lifting the cup to his lips and taking a long drink. It had been way too long since his last intimate affair, obviously. He could barely concentrate with a beautiful woman within standing distance. Excuse me while I get my caffeine injection. Long shift, doctor? Tabitha asked in that professional way that his staff spoke to him. He turned to her, despite his natural instincts that said prolonged staring would be dangerous for him. You're a nurse? She laughed in a short, shocked way. How did you pick up on that? God, she was beautiful. Those eyes. Ah, the way you said Dr. Z actually. Which hospital do you work in? St. John of God. Lovely hospital. Small. But had a very demanding staff requirements. That would mean Tabitha would need to be a top 10% in efficiency and professionalism. Yes, it is. The staff are lovely. She smiled and he knew she was telling the truth. Maybe she enjoyed exacting people. What specialty? I work in the ER most of the time, but I float. Then she was more than a hard worker, she would be brilliant. He respected that. He tried to keep his mind on the appointment he should be having with his patient, but he couldn't stop looking at the curve of Tabitha's cheek, the kink in her long hair. She also had a warmth to her that was extremely attractive to him. Too many women suffocated that warmth with an attitude that grated on him. He didn't think a woman had to be a bitch to be strong. Someone cleared their throat and he looked across to Samantha, who was glancing between her sister and himself with a cat that ate the canary smile. He slid back in his seat and focused on his patient, not her beautiful sister. How are you today, Samantha? You look happier than last week's appointment. I'm much better, doctor, thank you. Still uncomfortable, but I took your advice and have handed off all my Christmas responsibilities, and I'm not going to stress about times or dates. I'll just wait until my babies are ready to enter the world. A smile kicked up the ends of his lips. I'm very glad to hear that. I've got you booked in for a routine ultrasound just to check on your baby's growth and position, if you'd like to do it now. Oh yes, please. Tabitha jumped to her feet to help Samantha rise. His patient lumbered up on the table and pulled up her flowing black top to reveal her swollen belly. You still believe that a natural birth is possible, doctor? Tabitha asked, stepping closer. Noah was once again struggling to focus. He picked up the lubricant bottle and applied the gel to the end of the ultrasound wand. Yes, I do. I have great faith in the natural method of childbirth. Tabitha's mouth quirked up strangely. Then you would be one of the only physicians I know who does. He shrugged. He'd trained under an obstetrician that the other professionals referred to as Lionel Vaginal, because he was known for his natural births. Breech posterior twins. He delivered them all, and Noah had a passion and respect for the innate intelligence of the man whose body hadn't given out during his long years in obstetrics. Our bodies are 1,000 times smarter than our conscious brain. Innate intelligence is unmeasured and pure magic as far as I'm concerned. Of course, I would not allow your sister to risk her life or that of her babies. I'm here with a hospital surgical room if need be. The smile Tabitha gave him lifted his heart up from the dusty coffin it had been sleeping in for far too long. Tabitha turned towards the screen, and Noah focused on the job in front of him. The screen lit up with black and white images, and he moved the scope around Samantha's belly to determine the position of her twins. Wonderful. One baby is moving into engagement position, head down, and the other is head up under your ribs. Samantha laughed. Yeah, I know. I can feel him or her. Tabitha moved away and sat back in the chair. Are you all right? Noah asked her, though she didn't look upset. Tabitha's gaze met with his, and a fission of animal awareness shot through him. He wanted to groan aloud. This was so amazingly inconvenient. Why couldn't he have met her at a restaurant or bar one night? Because you do nothing but work. Oh yes, of course. I just don't want to see what sex they are, and I don't trust myself not to look. No. I don't want you knowing if I don't. Samantha cried. Tabitha rolled her eyes in a way that only a sibling would. I know. That's why I'm over here. Noah laughed. He couldn't help himself. He was used to being the comedic relief in his consulting rooms, lessening the tension that impending birth brought. But today he was the spectator, and it was great. He did one final sweep of the abdomen, checking for placental position, and then removed the probe. Everything is looking great, Samantha. You can get up now if you'd like. He reached out a hand to her, and she used him like a crane to get back on her feet. If one baby's in the breech position still, will I have to deliver that way? She asked as she sat back down. Probably not. In the ideal situation, and what usually happens, is that once baby 1 delivers, the second baby will turn as it has twice the amount of room and will deliver head down also. Samantha's face lit up. That's wonderful. Thank you. The two women got to their feet to leave, and a strange panic crossed Noah's chest. He couldn't let Tabitha go without attempting another meeting. Samantha, if you want to go out to Cheryl to confirm your next appointment, can I have a minute to speak to your sister? Yes, of course, doctor, Samantha said, sneaking off with the biggest smile on her face. It was his turn to want to roll his eyes. If Samantha was playing Cupid for her sister, then she was doing a good job of it. Yes, doctor? Tabitha asked, her eyes bright and her attention clear. Can we drop the doctor-nurse thing for a minute, Tabitha? It's Noah, please. Her eyes shuddered strangely, and somewhere in his chest his heart lurched. Of course, Noah. What's up? Her voice had gone strangely high-pitched, and he wondered if that meant she was as self-conscious and nervous as he had become. I was wondering if you'd meet me for a drink or dinner out sometime. Soon, preferably. She didn't said no straight off the bat, and he hadn't seen a wedding ring, so he plowed forward. I know with our schedules we'll have to book months in advance for even a coffee, but I'm hoping you don't mind dating doctors as well as working with them. His attempt at light humor was treated by a strange eye avoidance move and a light laugh. Doctor. Noah. Warning. Look, I can see this isn't going as well I'd like. So I'll give you more information. I know us type of personalities prefer that. I come from a large family, 4 sisters and 2 brothers, most of them are professionals. I work 60 to 80 hours a week, never been married. He waited, hoping that she'd open back up into the radiant personality he'd seen only 10 minutes before. She lifted her gaze, and for the first time he saw true vulnerability in her bright blue eyes. I like being rather busy. My family's just my sister and me, but we're very close, as you can see. She stopped, and the hesitation was clear. You're married? He asked, realizing that was probably the first question he should have asked her. He was clumsy with dating now. I was, she admitted. I went through a pretty crappy divorce at the start of the year, and I haven't gotten back out there yet. The yet was what gave him enough hope to move forward with his next query. Well, I finish work at 5, and assuming none of my patients go into labor tonight, how would 7 o'clock dinner be? Casual pizza, fancy, whatever you want. She bit her lip and didn't say anything. Tentative, a new side to her, and he wasn't sure what to do. Cheryl appeared at the corner of his eye, and he knew he was out of time. He pulled his business card out of a back pocket and handed it over. "I've gotta eat, so I'll be heading out for dinner tonight, no matter what. This has my cell number on it, so if your sister talks you into giving me a chance, give me a call and we'll figure out where to meet." She took the car with hesitant fingers and held it tight. "Okay. Thank you." She hurried away, and Cheryl ushered in his next patient. A long sigh left him. First time at the plate in years, and he wasn't sure if he'd struck out or not.
Chapter 3. You have to call him Tabitha, you simply have to. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And one of the hottest, most intelligent, sexiest. Yeah, I know. But I'm not ready to date anyone yet. Even to her own ears, Tabitha knew she sounded childish. Ah, pa. Samantha swiped her hand in the air to dismiss Tabitha's excuse. How long since you've had a man in your bed? A year? I think that's more than enough time, Tabitha. Tabitha turned away to switch on the kettle so her sister didn't see the look on her face. It had been longer than 12 months, unfortunately. Her sex life had died off shortly after their honeymoon, and Tabitha hadn't really been surprised when she'd found out he'd been screwing the ophthalmologist. He had to be getting it from somewhere, because he hadn't been getting it at home. Maybe? No, maybe. I've asked his receptionist about Dr. O'Grady so many times, and she says he doesn't date. If you got his attention, then you need to jump on it while you can. And it's Christmas, so you never know. That deserved an eye roll. Yeah, such a magical time of the year. Samantha's hand softly grabbed Tabitha's arm and she turned toward her sister's concerned face. I don't want to move knowing you're still sad and alone, sis. I love you so much. Please take this chance. For me. That wasn't a fair move to play. It's not like we'll be married and living happily ever after within the next month, Sam. Her sister rolled her lip down into her famous puppy dog begging face, and Tabitha mentally threw up her hands in defeat. Fine, I'll call him. One dinner. And if he was as nice as he seemed, maybe a coffee afterwards as well. She didn't even let her brain indulge all the pros and cons of dating a physician with an already jam-packed schedule. They hadn't gotten past the first date yet, so no point already dragging down her enthusiasm. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on Noah's business card, her stomach jumping inside her abdomen like a jackrabbit. His voicemail soon chimed in and she took quick short breaths while she answered. Hi Noah, it's Tabitha. I just wanted to let you know that I am free for dinner tonight. There's a pizza place about a block from the hospital, Mario's, if you wanted to meet me there at 7. Great. Thank you. She hung up before her voice rose to a squeal. Then she did let out a gasp that sounded suspiciously like a teenager. Oh crap, that was harder than I thought it would be. Her sister actually clapped. You did great. Now we've got to find something for you to wear. Come raid my closet. I've been meaning to ask you to take anything that fits you. God knows I'll never be a size 6 again. Tabitha laughed at her sister but didn't want to comment. The last thing she wanted Samantha to do was put pressure on herself after the baby was born. They made their way into Samantha's walk-in and spent the rest of the day going through her fashionable clothes. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, Tabitha had already consumed half a bottle of white wine and wore her sister's favorite black dress and heels to keep her confidence as high as possible. She teetered on the stilettos and her alcohol-soaked knees, waiting outside the restaurant for him. Whoa, you look amazing, Noah said as he walked up to where she stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. Thank you. I raided my sister's wardrobe and then an Uber dropped me here, she admitted, what little filter she possessed totally obliterated by the wine. He gave her a strange smile and indicated the restaurant door. Shall we go in? I'm starving. They made their way inside and were shown to a booth in the back. The doctor scrubbed up well outside his work attire and wore a soft leather jacket and blue jeans. Casual and perfect. What sort of pizza do you like? He asked, as she scrolled through the menu, her stomach growling in its calls for calories. As usual, she hadn't eaten much that day. Since her divorce, her appetite had dropped and so had her weight, which was the only reason she fit into her sister's dress. I eat practically anything except mushrooms and olives. Great. So you want to share? Maybe a seafood gourmet and the quattro formaggio. She grinned and dropped the menu. Perfect. Thanks. And some garlic bread if possible. Her head was spinning a little too much, and her decision to loosen up with some wine was fast becoming a less than smart idea. I'm sorry, I'm a little tipsy already. My sister plied me with wine, but the pizza will soon soak it all up. Noah gave her a proper smile this time. Dutch courage, huh? She nodded. Yeah, you could say that. Well, I'm glad you called. I wasn't sure you would. She laughed this time. Yeah, me neither. I haven't exactly been myself this year. I can understand that. Divorce can be shockingly painful, especially if you aren't the one wanting the change. She clenched her hands together in her lap. Oh, I wanted it all right. I was the one who filed for divorce. But he was the one cheating, so I suppose he was the one who really wanted out. Oh, ouch, he said, his face twisting up in obvious sympathy. Yeah. You're telling me, she said, suddenly craving the wine she'd left back at her sister's house. Maybe she ought to order some more? The waiter came up and Noah ordered their pizzas and then turned to her and asked, Did you want more wine? She almost said yes, and then shook her head at the last moment. She needed to keep her wits about her around this guy. She could already feel herself wanting to pour out her heart to him, something she simply didn't do. Time to focus on him. Tell me more about you, Dr. Big Family. He laughed out loud, a rich husky sound. It was soothing to her soul in a strange, blissful way. This was the sort of man she needed in her life. Happy. Smart. Kind. Not much to tell really. Went to Cal U. I'm 39. 40 next year, huh? Big party planned? 40 seemed so far off for her, but in the scheme of things it probably wasn't. God, I hope not. But I have 4 sisters, so you never know what they have in store for me. She loved the idea that he let the strong women in his family surprise and spoil him. Okay, then why aren't you married? Surely your family would have thrown women at you for decades now. Ha. Well, firstly, yes, you're right. My sisters have a weekly family email blast, and it often has date recommendations for me. She sat up straight and looked him in the eye. You're joking, right? They couldn't possibly. How rude would that be? He burst out laughing and shook his head. I only wish I were. They're all moms, so I get a list of single mothers from school, etc. Neighbors, tennis partners. That is so intense. But I suppose they're trying to help, and even despite the whole doctor thing, you're an easy sell to all the moms, especially because you love kids. He smiled gently. Yeah, I do. Something just wasn't adding up with this guy. No one this perfect was single. What sort of skeletons did he have in his closet? 7 illegitimate children tucked away somewhere? So, she led with, hoping he'd spill the beans earlier rather than later. She had no defense against a truly good guy. So? Did she have to spell it out? Their food arrived and she grabbed at the garlic bread, eating a piece quickly before continuing with their conversation. She was a real lightweight with alcohol, and needed to be careful she didn't say anything too offensive or unflattering. So, how are you not married? I simply can't believe there's an unattached physician who loves kids, has a great family support network, a sense of humor, and your face. My face? She laughed. Oops. Hadn't meant to say that. Yeah. He quirked one eyebrow up at her and heat rose in her cheeks, sending her skin into the scalding range. And there was nowhere to hide, so she grabbed a glass of water off the table and buried her face in it. Well, I don't know how to answer that, to be honest. College consumed years of my life, then med school. Then a specialist internship, residency, private practice. I've been so focused on getting where I wanted to be professionally for so long that now that I'm here, my social life is unsurprisingly very lacking. Images of all the doctors she'd worked with over the years flashed before her eyes. But aren't those hospitals like incestuous cesspools? Doesn't everyone sleep with everyone else? She didn't know a single nurse who hadn't slept with at least one specialist. He laughed. Speaking from experience, Tabitha? Horrified, she flushed another hot blush. No. Not me. I never dallied around with the doctors, I just know that a lot of the others did. And with Noah being handsome, and above all else a great guy, he would have been beating them off with a stick. He shrugged and picked up his pizza slice. I can't say I've been a saint, I just never found anyone I wanted to share my whole life with. I've had girlfriends, but none of them understood my work. They didn't like me being on call 24 hours a day, or having to work through the holidays. Her face was cooling, so she put down her drink and began to eat, the explosion of garlic across her taste buds a surprising compliment to the seafood pizza. So, you never even got close to being married then? I did once. What happened? She asked, some insane need to find out about his romantic past driving her forward. As a woman, she knew she was crazy to ask such questions. They'd only lead to jealousy and all sorts of crap later, but even so. She left me for an oncologist who works 50 hours a week and flies her around the world every other month. For the first time since she'd met him, Tabitha saw the light go out of Noah's eyes, and she didn't like it one single bit. She reached across the table and grabbed his hand. Then she's a fuckwit. That made him explode with laughter, but he didn't pull his arm away. I agree. I know all specialties have their place, but I'd personally prefer to spend my time birthing babies every day, she said, finally seeing the warmth return to Noah's face. Well, obviously I agree. Okay, it's my turn for the probing questions, he announced, and she slowly withdrew her hand. She wasn't sure she liked the sound of that. Okay, shoot. When was the last time you kissed someone? Oh, That one had taken her by surprise. I don't know, a year maybe? Noah began to slide around the booth, moving closer to her. Her heart began to hammer in her chest, and she swallowed hard as her throat tightened. Well, I think we need to remedy that right now. Noah reached up and cupped her face with the softest of all caresses. She couldn't help but lean into it. Whatever you say, doctor, she whispered as he moved closer. His nose brushed by hers, and she tilted up her chin to meet his lips as they pressed against hers. He held her there, not rushing her. Not pressing deep. Just tasting her. It lasted longer than she thought it would, her eyes drifting closed and her hands moving up to his shoulders to hold him there. Then a moan escaped from her throat, and he pulled her closer, separating her lips so that he could sweep his tongue inside. She groaned again as his flavor swept her mouth. He tasted of heaven and sin all at once. Pure hot male. She let her tongue meet his in a dance as old as time. Then he began to draw away, kissing her lips gently closed and then pulling away. She blinked her eyes open slowly, the dreamlike quality of the kiss something to always remember. He cleared his throat and looked at her with fire lit in the embers of his eyes. That was far more than I intended, I apologize. He was apologizing? For what? Don't apologize, please. He slid a look at her. You aren't mad at me? She huffed on a startled laugh. Hardly. That was beautiful. A growl left his lips a moment before he swooped on her for another kiss. This time she was ready for him. She pressed his lips open and slanted her mouth to best taste him, the fire in her flesh lighting up her whole body and making her yearn for his hands on her skin. A stifled groan came from him, and he pulled away, though the look on his comically angry face made it clear he didn't want to. Please don't do that, I won't be able to stand up for another 5 minutes now. A grin pulled up her lips on both sides, and a strangely happy mood filled her mind. That good, huh? She joked, and he growled. He growled back. Wow. She'd never caused such a reaction from a man before. It was strangely intoxicating. You have no idea how much I want to take you back to my house and kiss every inch of that delectable little body of yours. She grabbed her glass of water and chugged it down. It was the only thing she could think of to stop herself from asking him to do exactly that. Noah cleared his throat. Did that make you uncomfortable? I'm sorry. She reached out for his arm and squeezed his flesh. He must think she was made of glass, the way he apologized all the time. And maybe she appeared that way sometimes, but she wasn't. Don't ever be sorry for wanting to kiss me. My ex-husband stopping wanting me weeks into our marriage, if he ever did, really. Her courage deserted her as the words flowed. She'd barely exposed any of her pain to anyone except her sister and her mother. Well, I want you more than I should. Tabitha grabbed at her courage with both hands, swallowing hard at the tightness in her chest. After being alone so long, it was hard to trust, hard to believe. But there was something special about this man, and ignoring every instinct that told her to plow forward would be stupid. I know what you mean. I didn't think I was ready for anything like this, but your kisses have me aching in places I'd forgotten even existed. That same fire she felt in her belly flashed in his eyes, and she leaned forward, eager to know which move he'd play next. Noah didn't know how he was going to contain himself for the rest of the night. This beautiful, angelic, broken creature brought out his most protective instincts, as well as his most base desires. He wanted to tuck her into his arms and take her home, put her into his bed and make her cry out with pleasure. She needed it, that was obvious. Whoever the asshole was that she'd been married to, it was evident he deserved to choke on his own tongue. Who would trade in this beautiful soul for another? He reached across the table and took her hand in his. That small physical connection was enough for now. Making love with her, he already knew, would be dangerous for him. If he didn't want to lose his heart in the process, he was going to have hold back, and that was going to be extremely tough with this woman. She demanded more, and his old tired heart was ready to give its all. He cleared his throat. You know, I haven't dated anyone in more months than I can count, but when you went to leave my office today, I couldn't fathom the idea of never seeing you again. She smiled up at him with a radiance that made his admission all the more worthwhile. I'm glad you asked me out to dinner. I would never have had the guts to do it myself. That was hinting at a mutual attraction. But you wanted to? Of course. I had to go sit down on that chair today during the ultrasound, because standing next to you was a bit difficult. That made him chuckle. He'd thought he was the only one affected by the attraction burning between them. Oh, really? Weak-kneed were you? She smiled softly and dropped her gaze. More like, aching. His gut tightened with lust once again and he stifled a groan. I can't take you home tonight, can I? Damn. Her gaze flew up and she bit her lip, as though scared to say what she wanted to divulge. So he pushed forward. I know you aren't supposed to want that on the first date, but God, you're beautiful. I'm going to have to go home and have a long, cold shower after this. She giggled and squeezed his hand, and although the prospect of very blue balls was in his future, he was glad for the compliment it paid her. Me too, I think. His stomach gurgled and he looked down at the cooling pizza. Well, let's finish the food off then and talk about something totally non-sexual so things can settle down. Let's find some neutral subject. Tell me something funny about work. That should keep his mind out of the bedroom. Tabitha launched into an animated discussion about their podiatrist, not naming names of course, and all his weird kinks and quirks. It was always the podiatrist. She had him laughing and smiling all night, and when it was finally time to kiss her goodnight, he held her too long and tasted her too much. For a man who'd believed his only course in life was his career, and that true romance was not in his future, well, today may have proven him wrong. Chapter 4. When are you seeing him again? Sam asked Tabitha as they walked around the local department store, choosing placemats and Christmas tree decorations for their family luncheon. Tomorrow night, actually. We're squeezing in a dinner between his day shift and my night shift. And although it had been 5 days since they'd last seen each other, he hadn't been absent. Noah had called her every single day, just to check how her day had been and to share a funny tale of his adventures. Far too quickly he was becoming a daily happiness that she was going to find very hard to give up if she had to. You two are going to be like ships in the night, if you move in together. Tabitha shrugged as her sister chose a heaping amount of decorations for her to load into the shopping cart, and she didn't even care. Bring on tinsel disaster, she was in too good a mood to worry about Holly. I think you're getting a little ahead of yourself, Sam. We've only been on one date. Sam rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. At his age, Dr. O'Grady is not fooling around. He knows what he wants and so do you. I say marriage in 6 months, baby a year after that, and you'll be back on track. This time it was Tabitha who rolled her eyes. Women and their ridiculous timelines. She'd once adhered to such a schedule, and all it had done was see her married to the wrong guy. She was never being that girl again. I don't think it'll work out like that, Sam, but surprisingly enough, I'm enjoying spending time with him. Who's surprised? Sam asked with all the authority of an older sister. He's hot, intelligent, single, and has an income that could support you and your household without you needing to work the ridiculous hours you do. Next topic. I like my work and so does he. But a few less shifts would probably be nice. Sam scoffed. Yeah, right. Tell me you wouldn't love to be Mrs. Noah O'Grady and sit at home tending babies in the house. She growled at her sister. No, I would not, Sam. Stop assuming I want everything you do. She was never planning on giving up her nursing career. She'd worked too hard for too long to be good at her job. Lots of moms worked part-time. Excuse me, a woman said as she walked closer. Did you say Noah O'Grady? Oh God, it's one of his sisters. Look at her eyes. Ah yes, he's my sister's obstetrician, Tabitha tried to explain, knowing that wasn't the line she should have gone for and yet helpless to clarify. And my sister's dating him. Sam threw back with a grin. Tabitha tried to smile, but struggled beneath the weight of his sister's stare. She mustered up the courage and pushed forward. You must be one of his 4 sisters. It's nice to meet you. I'm Tabitha. The woman, who looked about her age, but more wise in the ways of the world, looked her up and down with a keen eye. How on earth did you recognize me? Your eyes mostly. And the way she spoke, the way she parted her hair, and the fact that Noah had said he had 4 sisters who lived locally. She supposed it was only a matter of time before they ran into one another. The woman nodded slowly, as though assessing the situation. I'm Millie. It's nice to meet you too. Noah doesn't bring many of his girlfriends home to meet us. Her tone made Tabitha grind her teeth, and she had to resist the urge to walk away. I'm not his girlfriend. We've only been on one date, so please excuse my sister's overly enthusiastic attitude. But he's a lovely man, and I'm really enjoying getting to know him. Really? Millie asked, her eyebrows rising high on her forehead. Other than the fact that he's gorgeous and a doctor who makes a fortune, what makes him so special? Tabitha knew she was being baited, but she couldn't stop herself rising to the hook like a fish in a pond. His infectious smile, his amazing laugh. His tenderness, his gentle touch. The way he cares for his patients and his staff. I've seen how much his staff adores him, and that adoration would not have been won easily, as I'm work in the same field. Millie softened in the way butter melts on a griddle. She grabbed Tabitha's hands and squeezed them. I hope we get to meet at a family event in the future. And then she walked away. Tabitha stared after her with the strangest feeling. One of doom and awe. If they were all like that, it was no wonder Noah was still single at 39. Sam grabbed her attention by tapping Tabitha on the arm. Whoa. What was that about? She shrugged, still watching Millie meander away. Noah comes from a really big family, and they're pretty protective of one another. Obviously. Tabitha shook herself, adrenaline still zinging through her bloodstream. The accusations his sister had made whirled around her head, and the more she thought about them, the angrier she got. What did Millie think she was? Some sort of gold digger after his money? She barely knew Noah. Let's go down this aisle, Samantha called as she waddled through the light section. Tabitha wasn't easily distracted. She couldn't shake the feeling of inevitability that invaded her senses. She was on a course with this man. For better or worse. She'd found someone worth dating, worth loving, and probably worth marrying. And all after she'd sworn off men forever. Hours later, Tabitha was getting ready for work when her phone rang. It was Noah. She picked the call up with a smile in her voice. Hey. Hey yourself. I am so sorry about Millie. I know what a bitch she can be if she gets a bee in her bonnet. Tabitha smiled to herself. After almost a decade of nursing in the department, I can handle an overprotective woman or two. She'd handled a lot worse before, it had just been a while since she'd dealt with a personal confrontation. Noah groaned. Oh God, I hope you don't meet the other 3 out and about while shopping for Christmas stuff. They're even worse. His voice, so reminiscent of how Samantha spoke about her, convinced Tabitha in that moment how devoted Noah was to his family. It's nice you guys are so close. Her ex-husband had been estranged from his only sister, and that had always sat uncomfortably with Tabitha. Sure, he'd blamed it all on his sister, of course, but looking back now, it was obvious who was really to blame. Yeah, but they're the main reason that my ex-girlfriend left me. She said it was because of them. I don't want them driving you away, too. They wouldn't be able to do that, because Tabitha knew the truth. That his ex-girlfriend was a selfish little bitch who didn't care about him. Family protected you because they loved you, they didn't drive people away who actually cared about you. Oh, you haven't met the rest of my family yet. We're smaller, but I bet my sister and mother could give your sisters a run for their money. There was a strange long pause. So you're not mad? Of course not. Why would I be? She actually kind of loved how fierce his sister was. It reminded her of Sam. And it was also a great compliment to Noah's character, because nasty people didn't inspire such love in others. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Where are we going? Oh, it's a surprise. I'll pick you up about 4 if that still works. Yeah, should be fine. Great, see you then. Tabitha got off the phone with a butterfly gently flapping its wings inside her belly. The excitement filled her up until she stifled a strange squeal that flew from her lips. Noah liked her, he really did. And amazingly, she knew she really liked him too. 4 o'clock rolled around and Noah pulled up in front of Tabitha's house. It was a nice home. Huge for only one person. And although he hadn't seen inside it yet, he knew it was built as a family home. Nothing like his chic city apartment. Which to his mind meant that Tabitha had planned on a family, a big one, when she'd married the asshole. Thankfully she hadn't gone through with having children with her ex, or she would have gotten stuck with him for decades. He knocked on the front door and within a moment, the door was opening. Hi, she said, greeting him with her beautiful happy smile. He couldn't help it. He stepped up and took her in his arms, her body a little stiff against him. Hi. He pressed a kiss to her lips, but she quickly pulled away. What's wrong? He asked, confused by her response. He'd thought they were onto a good thing here, and that included affection in public. Oh, nothing, I just don't want the neighbors to see. She hurried off the porch and across to his car. He walked slowly behind her, annoyance building in his gut. She didn't want the neighbors to see that she was dating someone new. Maybe because they thought she was married still. Why would she care about that? Where are we off to? She asked, getting into the passenger side. He closed the door for her and strode around the car. You'll see. He got in and turned on the ignition. He had to ask. What's with the embarrassment on the porch? Do you have a private detective who lives next door or something? She looked away, out the window. No, it's not that. It's just that. She trailed off and didn't continue. Just what? He wanted to know. He didn't have a timeline for this relationship. Hell, he hadn't planned it at all. But he didn't want to be with someone who was embarrassed to even be seen with him. Tabitha sighed heavily. The old lady next door is still harping on about how divorce is a sin, and all men cheat and that's normal and so on. She thinks I'm the terrible one for kicking my husband out. He reached over and put his hand on her thigh. The muscles tightened beneath his hand, but he left it there. She sounds like a bitch. And you don't deserve that in your life. She heaved a sigh and turned back to look at him. Yeah, I agree. They drove on in companionable silence through the streets of Seattle until they pulled up outside his mother's huge house. Wow. Where are we? She asked, leaning forward to look up at the house through the windshield. My parents' place. My nephew is having his 4th birthday party, and I said I'd drop in if I could get away from work. He watched her face carefully. She stared through the glass, a strangely blank look on her face. Bad idea. No, it's lovely, but I would have probably worn something different. She gestured down to her skirt and silk blouse and he grinned. You look super sexy, and I can't wait to introduce you to my crazy family. You said you could handle them, yeah? This would be a baptism by fire for both of them, but he didn't want to go down the same road he had with Carrie. Years of fighting, over what? The fact that she never wanted to see his family, and they never wanted to see her. He couldn't do it again, and besides, he trusted his mother's instincts regarding women. If she approved of Tabitha, then he could relax a little. Tabitha grinned at him and undid her seatbelt. Tossing me in the deep end, huh? He smiled back. Smart girl. Baptism by fire. Let's go then. They hopped out of the car and he took her hand as they crossed the street. So, I'm your what? She asked as he led her up the front steps. We can just say friend if you like. She nodded rapidly and he knew he'd read that correctly. She wasn't ready for titles, but she seemed excited to meet his crazy crew. He lifted his hand to knock on the door and she grabbed his arm to stop him. What if they don't like me? He laughed at her and knocked hard. They'll love you. Just be yourself. He didn't really know what had possessed him to bring home a date after such a short acquaintance. But it felt right, and after too many years of following his gut above all else, he trusted it. The door swung open and his mother appeared. Noah? I'm so glad you made it. She grabbed him up in a hug, then drew away, her gaze dancing over to Tabitha. And this is? Mom, this is Tabitha. Tabitha, may I present the matriarch of our family? It's really nice to meet you. I'm so sorry I didn't bring a gift. Noah didn't tell me we were coming to a birthday party. Tabitha rattled off, her sweet nervousness clear as day. His mother smiled with genuine happiness. Oh, don't worry about that. He's got more presents than a kid knows what to do with. Come on in and have something to eat. I hope you're not a vegetarian, his mother said with a mock scowl. Noah rolled his eyes. His last girlfriend had been a vegetarian, and an outspoken one at that. Oh no, not at all. Can't do double shifts at the hospital on salad, Tabitha joked, and his mother's face lit up again. You work with Noah? Oh no. I work at St. John of God in the department. As a nurse? His mother asked. Yes. Tabitha answered, and his mother took her by the arm and led her through the family room. I was a nurse myself. 36 years at St. Mary's. And off they went. Tabitha handled his family beautifully for the whole evening, laughing and talking with them like she'd known them for years. His mother sent glowing praise her way, and even his sisters seemed to like her once they gave her a chance to speak. Noah stood with his brothers for most of the afternoon, but kept an eye out for any signs of trouble. By the time the sun had gone down and they'd both stuffed themselves full of dinner, drinks, and then birthday cake, it was time to go home. Thank you so much for having me, Tabitha gushed at his parents, who in turn stepped forward to hug his new friend. Even his dad. Which was huge for a man who barely shook hands with anyone. Drop in anytime, they told his little nurse, and as they walked away, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Well, you certainly wrapped them around your little finger, he told her, chuckling as they got into the car. They're really beautiful people, Tabitha sighed, a content smile settling onto her lips. Yeah, just don't get on the wrong side of an argument with them. They're ruthless. And sore losers, he warned her. She slid her hand onto his thigh like it was the most natural thing in the world and giggled. I consider myself forewarned. Noah started the car but couldn't quite bring himself to take her home. Are you working this evening? He asked. Not anymore. One of the nurses wanted a swap, so now I'm doing an afternoon double tomorrow. She went quiet and looked at him. What about you? Well, I'm always on call, of course, but I'm not working until 10 tomorrow. There was silence again as the time ticked by, and Noah decided to grab the opportunity by the horns. My apartment's only 10 minutes or so from here. Would you like to come back for a drink? She chewed on her lips, an adorable habit she had when she was nervous. He put a hand up to wave off any confusion. No pressure, of course. I just don't feel like ending this date so soon. She nodded quickly, not meeting his gaze. I'd love to see your place. He didn't need any more of a yes than that. He turned the car onto the main road and headed back to his apartment. He owned a 2-bedroom penthouse in a small block near the hospital. It was convenient and, he thought, a good investment. He pulled into the underground parking garage and turned the ignition off. They got out of the car and walked towards the elevator. He swiped his access card, pressed the button, and turned towards her. I have red wine or white. What's your preference? Tabitha didn't answer. Instead, she took control of the awkward situation and kissed him passionately, pressing her body against his and holding his face with her warm hands. He responded in kind, wrapping his arms around her waist and exploring her mouth with his tongue. She moaned in her throat in that delightful way she had, and he thrust against her pelvis. The doors dinged open and they broke apart, luckily finding the lift unoccupied. Let's go, he growled, tugging her into the elevator with him, tapping his card again that would allow access to his private floor. He didn't want the heat between them to diminish at all, so he pressed her up against one of the mirrored walls and kissed her as deeply as he craved. There were so many things he wanted to do to her, all at once. But he contented himself with holding her beautiful face in his hands and tasting her perfect lips. Her response was exquisite, passionate, and unguarded. She grabbed at his shoulders and held him tightly to her. He loved her passion, her honesty. It was clear she wanted him as much as he wanted her by the way she moved and looked at him. There were no games with Tabitha. Or there hadn't been so far. Only time would tell if she was playing a longer game. The doors to the elevator dinged open, and he tugged her out and straight to his condo. He locked his front door and brought her into the warmth of his great room. She put a hand on his chest and pushed him down so he landed on the couch. She shifted her skirt and straddled him in a truly sexy, dominant way, and his cock throbbed hard against the zipper on his jeans. She kissed him slowly and kept her eyes open, so that he was looking directly into her soul as she snuck the tip of her tongue into his mouth. He groaned at the sign of her need and grabbed for her delicious body, her rounded hips, her indented waist, pulling her blouse out of her skirt and sliding his hands up under her top. Her soft breasts filled his hands, the lacy bra pressing into his fingers and keeping her flesh from his ultimate touch. He pulled back and unbuttoned her blouse, one agonizingly slow button at a time. The fabric fell away and her body revealed itself to him. "You are so beautiful, Tabitha." She smiled shyly and ran her hands up his arms, grabbing onto his shirt. "Can I see you too?" A grin spread across his face as excitement filled his blood. "Absolutely." Chapter 5. Tabitha's heart fluttered in her chest like a caged canary, desperate to break free of its confines. She burned everywhere. In her belly, deep between her thighs where she longed for him to be. "You were incredible," she whispered as she cuddled into his chest and laid a small hand on his stomach. He picked up her hand and examined the short, perfect nails, the soft skin of her palm. He brought her hand up to his mouth and kissed it softly, a small part of him wanting to suckle each fingertip and start seducing her once again. But his body was too sated to contemplate much past that point, so he lay her hand down once again and let his eyes close. That was when his phone went off with a tone he recognized from the hospital. "Damn. I'm so sorry." He rolled away from her to grab his cell, the one thing he couldn't ignore. "Dr. O'Grady." "Doctor, we have Mrs. Phillips in the hospital at the moment, and the physician on duty thinks she has placental abruption." "Shit. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He didn't even have time for a shower. "I'm so sorry, Tabitha," he said as he pulled a pair of clean pants out of his closet. "One of my patients is going to need a C-section tonight, and I can't leave her in the hands of the doctor on duty." She sat up in bed, pulling the sheet up over herself. "Of course, I totally understand. I'll just get dressed and call an Uber." "No," he said as he pulled on his shirt. He had a very small window to get to the hospital in time to save that baby. "I'll probably be back in a few hours, so if you're happy to just go to sleep, I'd love for you to stay the night." She smiled as she shuffled back so that she could sit up against the headboard. "I don't want to inconvenience you." He groaned loudly. "Damn, I hate this part of my job. I'm so sorry I have to leave you after that amazing session, but..." She waved her hand in the air. "No, trust me, I understand. Please go save your patient and I'll be here when you get back." He tugged on his surgical runners and leaned down to kiss her. "Thank you for being so understanding. We'll go out for breakfast if you want." She nodded and smiled contentedly as she nestled back under the covers. Then he ran out the door. This was the one part of his life that no girlfriend had ever understood. His patients' needs came first because for them it literally could be life or death. He took the elevator down to the garage and ran to his car. He really liked this girl. More than liked her if he was being honest with himself. And he had all his fingers crossed that as a nurse, she would have more patience with him than anyone else had, because after working for 20 years to get here, he had no intention of letting any of it go.
Chapter 6. Noah must have come in during the night because when Tabitha woke up after the sun rose, he was nestled in behind her, fast asleep. She lay there for a while, trying not to wake him up because she knew the moment she moved, she'd disturb him. She'd missed this so much. Waking up with someone close by. Sleeping alone was horrible. Dogs and cats didn't even like it. They curled up on you and practically slept on your head to be close to you. Close to a beating heart and warmth. Why were humans the only ones silly enough to live in big houses all alone? On purpose. But there was something different this morning, excitingly different, about waking up with a man's arms around her. Holding her close. Her ex-husband would stay on his side of the bed and not reach out and touch her, but even his breathing pattern was a comfort on some deep, primitive level. This was intimate. So different. So much better. And she loved it. "Good morning." Noah groaned as he stretched away from her but kept a hand on her hip as though losing contact wasn't an option. "Good morning. What time did you get in?" She rolled over to face him and flung a leg over his knee to remain close. He rubbed his face and blinked rapidly. Not sure exactly. 3 a.m. I think." Oh wow, you must be tired. She'd gotten 4 hours more sleep than him, and she could still feel the drag of fatigue on her muscles from too many years of shift work. He grinned that gorgeous smile of his. I'll be fine once I wake up in a minute. Slept like a baby once I had you to cuddle. God, he's beautiful. She ran her hand over the expanse of his chest, loving every detail of his masculine body that was so different from hers. Was your patient okay? The time he got home didn't bode well for the success of his operation. Yes, she'll be okay, I believe. The C-section was much more complicated than normal. She lost a lot of blood, but I'll keep a close eye on her over the next few days. She stretched out next to him and checked the time. Maybe they could fit in another lovemaking session before breakfast? Noah, do you think? Then his phone went off again. He reached for it, answering the call with his eyes shut. I'm okay. Yes, you were right to call me. I'll be in soon, give me half an hour. He groaned as he hung up. I have to go in early. Rain, check on the breakfast, I hope. Disappointment niggled at her mind, but she pushed it away. She thought she worked too much. Noah was on a whole other level than her, and she needed to seriously think about whether she wanted a man who was on call 24/7. She'd never really thought about how it would impact their lives before now. She reached for him and tugged him close, kissing his full lips. Of course. You're a saint. He rolled out of bed, then turned back to hold out his hand. Want to join me for a quick shower? I wish I had time to make love to you again, but we'll have to wait for another day. Sounds great. She jumped up and joined him in his huge shower, loving the fun and laughter he added to everything. When he headed back to the hospital and she took an Uber home, a gray cloud followed her. Did she want someone who would always put her second? Who jumped the moment his cell rang? Was she being extremely selfish, expecting to be first when the man was literally saving lives? As a nurse, she knew exactly how important a physician's job was, literally life and death. Probably. The doubts and worries whirled around her mind until she was a mass of confusion. There was only one way to work it out, and that was talking to her sister. Sam fixed everything. Change of plans. Can you take me to 121 Fenacre Circle? Thanks. She was soon sitting in her sister's kitchen while Sam attempted to rearrange her pantry. I don't know if this is normal. I know they call it nesting, but I need to organize everything. I started with John's tie collection yesterday, and ended up doing the whole walk-in closet, our bathroom, and now the kitchen feels like an utter mess. Tabitha laughed. I have no idea if it's normal or not, Sam. I've never had the pleasure of going through nesting before. Her sister continued to pull jars out and rearrange them, while looking over her shoulder at Tabitha. So, how'd your date go last night? Am I correct in assuming you haven't been home yet? You're still wearing my clothes. Sam grinned at her with an all-too-knowing smile. Tabitha glanced down at her wrinkled black skirt. Yeah, I was on my way home this morning and detoured to you. Because? Sam asked while continuing to sort and wipe down her kitchen. How did she put this simply? Tabitha opened her mouth, then when nothing came out, she shut it again. She may as well just spill it out. Well, because I'm starting to think that we just don't suit. Arg. Her sister groaned out loud. I knew you'd do this. The moment he showed you that he was a decent human being you could actually fall in love with, you'd find something wrong with him. That wasn't fair. Oh no, that's not it, Sam. Her sister's glare clearly indicated that she didn't believe Tabitha. Tabitha sighed heavily. Hiding anything from her sister was fruitless, but that didn't mean she was necessarily correct. Look, you're right about one thing. Noah is amazing. Funny, happy, attentive. He took me to meet his family last night, and they were great too. That got her sister's attention. Sam turned right around and faced Tabitha, her eyes wide and her eyebrows high. Really? What was that like? Tabitha sighed again, this time with happiness. It was out of a movie perfect, actually. It was his nephew's birthday, so the whole family was there. Super casual. Lots of food, drinks, cake. Her sister rolled her eyes. You know that's not what I mean, Tabitha. Oh yeah, sorry. His family adores him and only wants what's best for him. They were all friendly, but the sisters pushed me a bit and I pushed back, and they seemed happy with my answers. Which she loved about the O'Grady women. What conversations they would have. Sam grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and poured them each a glass. What was Dr. O'Grady like, with the other kids and his parents and stuff? I find it hard to imagine him as anything other than a doctor. Tabitha pursed her lips together, thinking about the question properly. He was great. Friendly, happy, affectionate. His niece and nephews kept jumping into his arms, so we barely had a moment to talk, but it all felt so. She reached for the word. So normal. Natural. Like we'd done it all 100 times before. And that really was the key to the success of the day. She hadn't felt awkward or unwanted. He hadn't made her serve him or run around trying to make everyone like her. He'd left her to stand on her own 2 feet, and she respected that about him. So what's the problem? She didn't want to answer her sister's question. Come on, Tabitha. I know there's something. Tabitha tapped her palm on her forehead. Honesty was the best way to go. Well, here goes. It's his job. Her sister stopped cleaning the sink she was scrubbing, not a good sign, and gave Tabitha her full attention. What do you mean it's his job? Because if you think he's not competent, you need to speak to some of his patients. I know I haven't gone through the actual labor yet, but he's been the perfect obstetrician for me so far. She waved her hands. Oh no, it's not that. I know he's a great doctor. I can see it in the way he treats his staff, his waiting list for private patients. His manner. Everything. Her professional personality could spot a good doctor at 100 paces. Then what's the problem? Sam asked. She realized all of a sudden that this wasn't something to confide to her sister in. After all, John worked ridiculous hours and Sam never complained. She probably liked it. Some women did. More free time and certainly more family money to spend. Tabitha waved her hand. Never mind. Oh, don't give me that. Come on. Sam beckoned to her. You're going to think I'm stupid. Sam grinned with the confidence of a true sister. Yeah. She was right. Sam had seen her at every high and every heartbreakingly stupid low. Tabitha gave up. Time to put her pride aside and see if her concerns had a basis or not. Okay. Honestly, I'm not sure I want to be with someone who is on call 50 weeks a year, 24 hours a day. I mean, we barely made it through sex last night and he was running back to the hospital. Her sister's whole posture relaxed and she began to chuckle. Oh goodness, is that all? Of course you're worried about that. Relief flooded through Tabitha at her sister's understanding. So you get it? Yes, of course. Even with men who aren't physicians, like John for example, there are always sacrifices for them having fantastic jobs and making good money. For you, it's going to mean that he'll always be late, leaving early, and rarely have any vacations. But at least you'll always know where he is. He'd be at the hospital, potentially saving lives. For me, we have to move around, and John's lucky if he's home before 9 at night, and he's gone by the time I wake up in the morning, but I have a great life. And I love him. So I make do. You just need to choose if no's worth the loneliness. It sounded like a real sacrifice to make. How do you do it then, Sam? She shrugged, a soft smile playing across her pretty face. It's easy, really. You just need to fill up your day and your life with other things. Unfortunately, your husband, or whatever he happens to be, can't be the center of your world. So whether he's there or not, your life needs to go on. Keep working full-time if that helps, or volunteer at the hospital, go on holidays with girlfriends, or come visit me every weekend. Or just enjoy the peace before babies come along and ruin all of that. Sam laughed but rubbed her belly with affection. A light bulb lit up in her mind and understanding dawned. Is that why you're so excited about the twins, Sam? Company? Yeah, in a way. They'll certainly keep me busy, although we've already talked about perhaps hiring a live-in nanny to help me, especially for the first year. John won't be able to do the nightly feeds or help me walk the hallways with screaming babies at night if he's working 80-hour weeks to keep us afloat. Her sister heaved a heavy sigh and Tabitha's heart twinged with guilt and longing. That's a good idea. I wish I could come with you and help you, Sam. Samantha smiled. You've got your own life, and I'm grateful for that. For you. I only want you to be happy, Tabitha. You need to know that. I love you so much. She reached out and grabbed her sister's hand, squeezing it tightly. I love you too, Sam. Please, sweetheart, be happy. Tabitha left her sister's house feeling lighter and happier than she had in ages. She'd told herself to follow her instincts about Noah, especially after having sex with him for the first time, and that's exactly what she would do. Making love to Noah had proven what an incredibly giving and passionate person he was. Selfless and loving. He was worth investing her heart in, she just knew it. Maybe the tide had finally turned for her, and karma was finally giving her what she deserved. Because there was a while there, she'd been unsure of everything in her world. Noah finished a 15-hour shift and fell into bed, his exhaustion intensified by the lack of sleep from the night before and the massive orgasm that had drained him of his testosterone. But what a night it had been. Tabitha had been everything he'd ever wanted in a lover. Passionate, honest, and orgasmic. He fell asleep with a smile on his face and woke to a dozen messages on his phone. Some from his sisters, a few from the hospital, and one from his beautiful nurse girlfriend. Tabitha. He lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, slowly stroking his cock, letting the memories flow over him. Then his phone went off with the hospital's ringtone. Arg. At least I got to sleep in. He answered the phone and rolled out of bed. It was time to go back to what he did best. Delivering babies and christening new parents. By the end of his shift, his need to see Tabitha had grown. Every time he saw a nurse stick her head in the surgical suite or his consulting room, he hoped it was her. Which was ridiculous, but he was beginning to think that he would need to ask her to come work with him soon, or he'd never again get his mind back on track. He picked up the phone and called her, but it went straight to voicemail. She was obviously working. He hung up and texted her, asking her to call when she had time. They had to set up another dinner or lunch, or even a sleepover. He couldn't wait to kiss those lips again. He went home alone and didn't like the quiet of his condo. For the first time in a long time, he wished for a woman to greet him when he came home. But there was no one, so he called in a Grubhub order and got some Thai delivered. Tabitha called him back when he was at work the next day, and he didn't get back to her until Monday night. They played phone tag for days until finally he managed to hear her voice. Hello, stranger. Long time no see. She laughed. I know. These shifts are going to be a major problem for the future. We're going to need to schedule our dates a week in advance. He smiled into the phone, though a strange tug pulled on his stomach. We just might. There was silence, and he realized they didn't know enough about each other to charge forth into that particular conversation. Ah. What are your plans for Christmas this year? She groaned in a frustrated way. Oh God, don't ask. He sat down on his couch and got comfortable. It seemed as though he'd found a topic. Don't tell me you're not obsessed by Christmas like every other woman I know. How long had you had your tree up already? A month. He grinned as he prodded for information. It was only the 5th of December, but those who loved Christmas set about their decorating very early. Always did. Arg, as if. I had no intention of putting it up at all, but I have to now. You just got more interesting, Tabitha. Don't tell me you don't like Christmas. Don't tell me you do, she scoffed back. He grinned, glancing around his bare apartment. There was no holly or red baubles anywhere to be found, and there never would be. Not in the least, he agreed. She sighed. Oh, thank goodness. I wasn't sure I could deal with a man who thought Christmas was all magical and crap. Well, you don't have to worry about that. This guy is quite happy to work all Christmas Day, New Year's and Easter. There was a sudden silence that made him wonder. What wrong? Nothing. You're right. Don't you work through the holidays? He asked her. Surely she did. Yes, but I took Christmas off this year as I'm hosting for my sister. Oh, that's good of you. Yes, I better go. I just finished a double shift, so I'm going to get some sleep while I can. Noah stood up, nervous energy zinging through his bloodstream. Let's book in our next date. What day works for you? Tomorrow? There was more silence, and he wondered where he'd gone wrong. They'd been getting along so well, and he thought they'd actually bonded over their lack of love for Christmas. I apologize if I said something wrong, Tabitha. I didn't mean anything by the Christmas comments. No, it's just that. What? What's wrong? His brain raced over everything he'd said, and he couldn't figure out his error. I'm not working tomorrow. We could meet for lunch or something? He had appointments, but he could work something out. Perfect. Do you mind if I message you tomorrow with a time? Yeah, no problem. She sounded strangely sad and he hung up, scratching his head. Sure, their timetables were going to clash and he was sure they'd struggle to get time together, but didn't shift workers do this all the time? Noah went about his day with a strange, unsettled feeling, like his new relationship was on the downward slope into oblivion. Like so many had before. And he was disappointed, more than he expected to be.
Chapter 7. Tabitha glanced up at the mistletoe hanging over her front door. Her sister had put it there last night, and although she didn't love it, she certainly didn't hate it. Noah's comments about working through every holiday had really hit a sour spot inside of her. Sure, she considered the holidays a shameful waste of money, a whole lot of pomp for nothing, but she'd do anything to be with her sister on Christmas Day. And if that meant working every weekend for 2 months beforehand, then she'd do it. Noah's expensive car pulled up at her curb, and she grabbed her keys and headed out the door. He got out to greet her, so she smiled as she settled into his car, but the feeling, as she had expected, was off. Hey you. So good to see you. Noah hovered over the center console and reached for her with both hands. She let him cup her face and draw her closer, falling into his kiss like she'd promised herself she would. This man was a doctor, a surgeon, a true healer. And an amazing lover. The little problem she could see could surely be overcome? When he pulled back, she smiled brightly. How's your week been? Oh, good. Busy as always. Never a dull moment, really. You? She smiled at the fact he'd asked her a reciprocal question. Her ex-husband hadn't, in a year of living with him, ever asked her how her day was. He simply avoided the question. The same, actually. The ER's a little quiet at the moment, because we all know it will be simply crazy over Christmas and New Year. Noah groaned as he pulled the car onto the road, and they drove out of her street. Oh God, yes. I remember those shifts in my residency. The was crazy over Christmas. You're not working that day though, are you? No. Not this year. But New Year's often worse. So much alcohol-fueled stupidity. Noah smiled but didn't say anything, and she laughed. I suppose your world's pretty far away from that. He grinned. Oh yeah. The worst thing I have to deal with on Christmas Day is women going into labor just like every other day. So it's no different to you, I suppose. She swallowed hard against the uncomfortable knot in her throat. Noah's hand came over to her thigh and squeezed. Hey. I thought you and I agreed on the fact that Christmas was a whole lot of stress for no good reason. We did. We do. I agree with you. But... She looked down at her hands where they were playing with the pattern on her leggings. But... I don't work Christmas if I can help it. I like being with my family, and I know I bitch and moan about the money and the effort, but my family's important to me. So is mine, you've seen that. That was true. I know I have. I suppose your comment about being happy to work right through the holidays got to me a bit. That's all. Noah pulled up outside a cute little local cafe that she'd always wanted to try, but had never gotten around to it. Oh great. I've heard this place is really nice. Let's go in then. Noah jumped out of the car and she followed suit, keeping an eye on the time as she was pretty sure he'd need to get back. What time do you need to return to the hospital? Not for another hour or so. We've got heaps of time. That didn't seem like a lot, but she knew what it was like with shift work, and 10-minute breaks felt like a lifetime when you'd barely stop to breathe in hours. They got settled in a booth and quickly ordered. Tabitha opened her mouth to start a normal conversation, but found the Christmas conversation was still prey on her mind. So where's Christmas Day for you? Your mom's house? Noah nodded as he picked up his latte. Yeah, it always is. My sisters fight her every year to have it at their places, but Mom always wins that battle. Plus her house is the biggest. Her house was great for parties. I'd wondered why your nephew's birthday party was at your mom's rather than your sister's. He shrugged. Just her way. As long as she's well enough to do it, she'll have 100 parties a year at her place. Tabitha smiled to herself as she placed a marshmallow into her hot chocolate. I like that. A dominant matriarch would make for a happy and well-cared-for family. You said you're doing Christmas at your place this year? Yeah, not my original plan. I believe I have you to thank for that, actually. His eyebrows flew up on his forehead. Me? How come? She laughed. I think it was you who told my sister not to stress about Christmas at her house, so she foisted it off on me. He chuckled loudly. That would be right. My own good advice coming back to smack me in the face. It was the best advice for her. I was actually pleased when she asked me, because I knew it meant that she could have the day to rest. Or give birth, he reminded her. Their meals arrived and Tabitha picked up her focaccia. This looks amazing. I agree. Noah picked up his own lunch when his phone went off, with that same ringtone she'd heard too many times now. Is that the hospital? Yeah. He took his cell out of his pocket and answered. Dr. O'Grady. Yes? Yes, okay. I'll be there in 5 minutes. He hung up and looked at her with that same regretful expression she'd seen days ago. Tabitha, I'm so sorry, I need to go. He pulled some money out of his wallet and called the waiter over. Here, this is for the meal, and would you wrap mine up for takeout, please? I have an emergency. The waiter rushed away and Noah began to pack up, picking up his keys and his jacket. I can drop you back at your house quickly if you want. His energy had changed to one of business and efficiency, and as the waiter delivered his wrapped lunch to him in a box and hers still sat nicely on her plate, Tabitha shook her head. No, I'm all good. I think I'll take my time and walk home. It's only a few blocks. Are you sure? Because... She waved her hand. It's my day off, so I'm going to relax. Go please. Call me later. Thanks. Noah ducked his head to kiss her, and she lifted her chin to receive the kiss. Memories of their night together flowed over her, and the weight of her decision was momentarily lifted from her. He flew out the door and she lifted up her hot chocolate and took a long drink. This was what her life was going to be like if they stayed together. He was married to his job. And she would always be the mistress begging for time. She ate her lunch and squashed the negative feelings from today. Even when she walked home, the threatening black clouds didn't dampen her strange mood. There was a numbness going on inside her mind, and she wasn't sure how to break through it successfully. There was a strange feeling of inevitability settling over her that she couldn't fight. This wasn't the life she wanted. To be moved aside in favor of her man's work every single day. And she knew the best way to avoid that would be a beck-and-call wife. Quit her job and stay home, so that no matter what tiny fragments of time he could give her, she'd be there to receive them. It wasn't her. Not now. Never would be. She walked the long way home, and her fingers were freezing cold when she finally returned to her house. She had a long shower and did some laundry, waiting for the phone call that would seal it all. Noah glanced at the clock and hid away in his office. He had a 10-minute break, and needed it to call Tabitha. His conscience was eating away at him for leaving her in the cafe today. That was low even for him. He'd realized afterwards that he hadn't even asked if she wanted hers wrapped up too. Because his brain had already transported itself to the hospital, ready to perform the C-section he knew was necessary for his patient. He plucked out his cell and noted there were no messages from her. If nothing else, Tabitha certainly wasn't a clingy girlfriend. If that was what she was. He tapped her number and the phone rang twice before she picked up. Hey Noah. You finished your shift already? Her tone sounded optimistic, so he was annoyed to have to tell her the truth. No, just on break and thought I'd call. Oh, thanks. And the mood shifted as simply as that. How was the rest of your afternoon? He asked, attempting to salvage the call. It was great, thanks. I enjoy peaceful days to myself. I rarely get them with picking up so many shifts at work. I'm sure you can empathize. He chuckled. I certainly can. Sleep is my main priority when I get home. Yeah, speaking of which, I need to get a few hours sleep before my night shift starts, so I better go, Noah. Hang on, can we schedule another date sometime soon? I know you're about to get extremely busy, but I'm sure we can slip in a coffee date or something. You mean like today? Her tone altered slightly, like the wind changed and brought with it an Arctic front. Well, today was unusual. Was it? Was it unusual for you to have to leave at a moment's notice for a patient? He didn't like where this was going. She was leading him down a path. Well, no, it's not. But usually I can grab another hour or so, as you know from last week. Well, Noah, I don't think I want to keep going on dates where I'm shoved aside the moment your work beckons. When and if we can find the time to see each other. That sounded like an ultimatum. Tabitha, what are you saying? I'm saying that this isn't going to work, Noah. Your life and mine simply don't fit together. That's probably true to a certain degree, but if you worked here we could coordinate shifts. She laughed, and it didn't sound like it was from humor. Me change my job? How about you tell your patients that you'll only see them during your scheduled shifts, and will not be on call 24/7? He hissed in a breath. What she was suggesting was totally against his philosophy on medicine. That's not possible, you know that. It is for every single specialty except yours, and you know you could take on a partner who could share the workload and take on all your cases when you're not at the hospital. He ground his teeth together. Yes, he could do that. Plenty of specialists tag-teamed in such a way. But he'd never found a doctor he trusted with his patients as much as he trusted himself. And that was a hard thing to find. I could. That's true. But you have no intention of changing anything about your life, do you, Noah? Because work is your number one priority, and no woman is ever going to come even second in your life, is she? Noah groaned. Oh, give me a break, Tabitha. You of all people should understand my work. I thought a nurse would be more empathetic than this. How could he have been so wrong again? This was why he'd stopped dating. Why he'd given up on the hopes of having a wife and children, like everyone else. It was just too difficult. Empathetic? Me. That's a low blow, Noah. I don't think my requests are unreasonable. Requests? You haven't made any requests. You've got complaints. He pinched the bridge of his nose as he heard her sigh. You're right. Well, Noah, my request is that you find a way to have a simple lunch date once a week without being called away. Is that it? Because that sounded reasonable. He supposed. Well, yes. But I suppose it's more a symptom of a bigger issue. Oh, here it comes. Yes. And what's that? It's all my fear more than anything else. Noah clenched his teeth together and tried not to groan aloud. He had all the patience in the world for women when they were in labor, but when all they wanted to do was point out his failings, his patience was no longer limitless. And what's that? That is, we stay together, we'll never have a proper life together. That we'll never any vacations together, you'll be running off in the middle of every dinner, birthday party. Christmas. Anger bubbled up inside him. This was the same crap gift wrapped with a different name tag. He'd heard it 100 times before, and it made him want to bang his head against a wall. This is about Christmas, isn't it? I should have known it was too good to be true, to find a woman who didn't go crazy around Christmas. Listen, Tabitha, I think you're right. We don't suit. Her tone turned colder. Yeah, you're right. You have your work and I have mine. I couldn't give up my shift work, even if I wanted to, so asking you to change is totally unfair. Maybe he'd been a bit harsh. Thanks, Noah. For everything. Tabitha hung up before he could get the words together. Sadness flowed over him, stronger than he'd expected. Dr. O'Grady. Your next appointment is here. Oh, thanks, Cheryl. Show her in. He went about his day as he always did, but there was a sense of sadness that he couldn't quash. He'd really thought Tabitha would be special to him. That she would fit into his life when no one else had. It seemed that he was destined to be alone forever. Chapter 8. Are you sure you don't need any more money for Christmas dinner? Have you got everything? Tabitha glanced at her overstocked fridge and overflowing pantry. Yes, Am. I've got everything. She'd kept herself busy, shopping for Christmas and decorating the house with all the crazy Christmas decorations her sister had purchased. How are you doing, sis? With the Noah thing? A pain stabbed at Tabitha's ribs, but she pushed it away. What Noah thing, Sam? We went on maybe 2 dates. That isn't exactly a long-term relationship. I know, but... No but, Sam? You'll see Noah more than me now. And speaking of doctors, how are those babies doing? Despite her sadness over her breakup with Noah, she'd convinced Sam to continue seeing him. After all, he was a brilliant physician. It was because of his commitment to his patients that she'd broken up with him. Sort of. She still couldn't decide if she'd called it off in the end or he had. Because she was pretty sure he'd trumped her by the end of the conversation. Oh, they're huge. I can barely do anything now. But John's been helping me with everything, and I've had Grubhub deliver practically every day this week. Tabitha smiled. He's a good man. Oh, that he is, and Mom's been by and cleaned the house for me too. That was good of her. I'll be over after my shift today, if you have some washing for me to do or... Sam laughed. You're so much like Mom. That would be great, thanks, hon. See you soon. They hung up and Tabitha glanced at her cell, where an alarm was going off on one of her apps. Her period app. That was odd. She clicked on the notification and saw the message. Her period was almost a week late. Impossible. She clicked back to last month's calendar and checked the dates again. She'd had this app since before she got married, and had hoped to use it to work out her fertility for when they got pregnant, but instead she'd ended up using it to follow her cycle. And she wasn't on any sort of contraception. Why should she be when she wasn't having sex with anyone? Oh, holy shit. Her hand flew to her mouth, blocking the second stream of obscenities. She scrolled back and counted, yes, definitely a week late. Or 5 days. That wasn't too bad, although she was never late. Not even by half a day. Her heart began to pound, and a sickening feeling had worked its way into her gut. She checked her diary, and took note of the date of her night with Noah, the flicked back to her period app. Day 12. Oh shit. The worst possible day. But what were the chances? She bit into her bottom lip. Too many of her friends had trouble conceiving. Especially when they were stressed. It could take months, years even. Surely she couldn't get pregnant on one night? And he'd used protection. Hadn't he? She searched back her memory, and recalled him asking something about her being safe. Oh no. He hadn't been asking about diseases, he'd been asking about protection. Probably about her being on the pill. But at that point in time, it had been the last thing she'd been thinking of. She'd been married, the last thing she'd been worried about was a condom. Or being on the pill, in case of a one-night stand. Oh shit, he was going to blame her for this. And he probably should. Don't get ahead of yourself, she muttered, taking a few deep breaths. She could grab a test from work tonight and do it when she went to the toilet. No big deal? It was still possible that she was just late. It wouldn't be the first time stress had provoked an unusual cycle in a woman. Surely not. The day passed too slowly, and by the time her night shift finally started, Tabitha was chewing on her nails in an attempt to deal with her anxiety. She'd already looked at the scenario in every which way, and she didn't even know if it was true or not. She needed to find out if she was indeed pregnant and deal with the repercussions then. She grabbed a test kit from one of the shelves, tucked it into the pocket of her scrubs and practically bolted to the bathroom. Sitting on the toilet was one of the craziest experiences, holding the strip beneath herself, peeing on the absorbent tip and trying not to get it all over her hands. Even as a nurse, she wasn't so good at this. She slid the tip on and placed it on top of the toilet paper roll as she cleaned herself up and got redressed. It said to wait 3 minutes, but she could see the line begin to form. One line, yes? That meant she wasn't. As that second line began to stand out against the stark white background, her heart fell. No, this wasn't the way it was supposed to go. Pregnant at Christmas. By a man who didn't want her. Fuck it. She put the toilet seat down and collapsed onto it, holding the stick in her hand as the lines got bluer and bluer. Clearer and clearer. She should probably have a blood test to confirm, she knew, but her lack of a period and this obviously positive affirmation were confirmation enough for her. She rubbed her fingers against her temples, fighting off the headache rising in her mind. What on earth was she going to do? She lifted the trash bin lid to throw away the stick, but thought better of it and tucked it into her pocket. She'd take it to her locker and hide it away and put it somewhere safe at home. She wasn't getting rid of this baby, no matter what. Dr. Noah didn't even need to know about it, if he didn't have the time. But how was she going to survive financially? She put a hand to her flat belly and took a deep breath. She'd work it out. Even if it meant selling the house she loved and moving in with her parents. A child had been her dream far longer than a mortgage had been. So she'd find a way to do it all. Somehow, Tabitha pushed through the rest of her shift that day, and the day after that, and the day after that. With the countdown to Christmas only 3 days away, she filled her days with cooking and decorating and calls with her sister. Not to mention gift wrapping. She'd bought all of her family small presents through the year when she could afford it, and then yesterday had gone out and bought more. Of everything. Her brother-in-law's money had paid for most of the Christmas Day festivities, so she blew the rest of her money on presents. A coat for her mother, a new necklace for her sister. She bought out the pharmacy on prenatal vitamins and looked into the housing market. She loved her house, but she couldn't afford it and a baby. And at night, that's when she did her crying. She'd really screwed things up with Noah. He'd been the first decent guy she'd met ever, really. If she looked at the differences between him and her ex-husband, they were simply worlds apart. Even at the start of their relationship with her ex, and he'd been on his best behavior, there had never been the same camaraderie. The same attraction. The same anything, really. But how to make it up to him? To apologize for being so stupid? So selfish? She didn't even have a word for a woman who had asked a man who saved babies' lives to reduce his hours to suit her. What sort of person did that? Especially when his lovemaking had shown her how caring he was. She continued to formulate a plan, although the catch-22 was what was stopping her from simply calling him up and telling him the truth. Because how was he going to believe her when she said she wanted him back, if she also told him she was pregnant? He'd think she trapped him on purpose. Or worse, he'd think she was only with him for the sake of the baby, and that was the last thing she wanted. She went to sleep Christmas Eve with an ache in her heart and her hand on her belly. Christmas Day. Tabitha was up at 6, cleaning and cutting up vegetables and putting the turkey on. By the time her sister and her mother had arrived, she'd managed to eat a few dry crackers, almost vomited a dozen times, and drank 2-quart bottles of water. She'd just ticked over 7 weeks and the morning sickness had started. Perfect timing. The smell of the roasting turkey made her stomach churn. "Oh my God, you've done such a good job," her sister exclaimed as she waddled into Tabitha's kitchen, looking around at the festive table decorated in silver and blue this year. "Not as nice as you would have done, Sam, but I tried." She pulled her sister in for a hug, holding her a little too long as Sam pulled back with a worried look on her face. "Are you okay?" She blinked back the tears threatening to spill. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be? Mom." She grabbed her mother up for a hug and kissed the men who'd accompanied her favorite women. "When did Aunt Teresa say they'd be here?" Mom asked. Tabitha glanced at the clock. "About an hour or so. We've got time to open presents or have a drink. Whatever you guys want." She'd prepared everything just so her mom and sister could relax on the day. "Let's open a few presents then. I've just got to put the sweet potatoes on to boil." Her mom moved away to grab a saucepan and Sam groaned loudly, gasping as she grabbed hold of her husband. "What's wrong?" Nothing. Just cramps. They've been going all morning." "Silly baby's giving me a hard time," Sam said through a forced smile. "All morning? Sam, you're in labor." She shook her head. "No, I'm not." A laugh bubbled up inside Tabitha's throat. "You're not, huh? Why?" "Because you don't want to be." Her sister's brow furrowed as she grabbed for her belly again. The nurse in Tabitha stepped forward. "Hey John, can you take my sister to my bedroom for a minute? Lie her down on the bed for me." "Why?" Sam asked as John directed his wife down the hall. "I'll be there in a minute." Tabitha grinned at her mom. "I'm going to go check out Sam, because I'm pretty sure she's in labor." Their mother smiled with glee and clapped her hands. "Oh, I hope everything's going to be okay with her and the babies." "Oh, I'm sure she will be. She has a brilliant obstetrician." Her mom stepped forward and opened her mouth as though to ask a question. "Hold that thought, I'll be right back." Darn Sam. Of course she told their mother about Tabitha's dates with the doctor. She could never keep anything a secret, even when they were little kids. Tabitha grabbed a sheet from the linen closet and walked into her room. "Tabitha, what are we doing in here?" Sam asked, her tone one of annoyance. "Lie on your back, Sam." "But just do as you're told for once. John, can you go keep Dad company for me?" John backed towards the door and left while Tabitha wrangled her sister, who luckily wore a long winter skirt. "I need your panties off, can you do it, or do you need my help?" Sam groaned. "Help please." Tabitha pulled her up to a stand, then kneeled and quickly pulled her sister's underwear off. Then she encouraged Sam to lie down on the bed and bent her knees. "Now, I'm going to check your cervix for dilation." "Why?" her sister groaned at her. "Because I think you're in labor, and if you are, we probably need to be getting you ready for the hospital. If you're not, then we can relax and enjoy Christmas." "I want to enjoy Christmas," Sam whined with an openly pouty expression. Tabitha shook her head as she pulled on a rubber glove she'd grabbed from the bathroom and slid her fingers in to check her sister's cervix. She almost couldn't look as two of her personalities warred against each other. The sister part just screamed ew, while the nurse personality was efficient in her job. 4 centimeters already. She withdrew her hand and tapped her sister's thigh. "Let's get you something to eat." Sam grinned up at her. "Oh great, I'm not in labor, right?" Tabitha helped her sister get to her feet and they walked back to the kitchen. "Quite the opposite. You're very much in labor and will probably deliver tonight, but you may as well enjoy my turkey before you go in." Sam's eyes widened comically and Tabitha grinned as she grabbed her sister's hands. "You're going to have your babies very soon." There was a general squeal of excitement in the room as Sam bent over to groan and gasp once again. Today was going to be a very special day for them all. Forever. Christmas lunch at his parents' home was even nicer than he remembered. The addition of his nieces and nephews meant that his folks really went all out on decorations, food and the tree. "So glad you could make it this year," his dad said as they sat on the back deck with a hot drink in hand. The snow was falling, a bit unusual for Seattle during Christmas. It covered the backyard in a picturesque dusting of white. "Yeah, it's been too long," he agreed, because it had. "But work always came first, and we understood that. Your mother and I are very proud of you." Noah took a long drink of his eggnog. His father rarely said any such thing to him, although at this point in time, surrounded by his ever-growing family, he was the one who was proud. "Thanks, Dad, but I've been trying to change that a bit recently." "Yeah? Would that have something to do with Tabitha?" Noah glanced over at his father. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she was here and now she's not. So I'm assuming things didn't go quite the way you planned." Was he really that transparent? "Yeah, well, she made a point or two that I took into consideration and I've added another physician to my practice. A young doctor, willing to learn what I know and fill in for me when I need him to. With 2 of us in the practice, it can expand a bit, and we'll both have coverage for holidays and vacations." "Is that why you're here today?" Noah nodded. "Yes. Although I may need to go in tomorrow, the partner has Christmas covered." It had been a good suggestion of Tabitha's, although at the time he'd struggled to hear anything other than her condemnation. "That's great, Noah. Hopefully it'll free you up a little to have more time off." "True. And perhaps more time to date or to mend the bridge with Tabitha." Because he really felt that she was someone worth pursuing. Worth loving. She fit into his family so well, and he felt the lack of her today more than any time over the past 3 weeks. And that was strange. To be surrounded by his big crazy family, who loved him more than anyone on the planet, and yet he wished Tabitha was here. To share this day with him. A day he told her he'd rather work through. He pulled his coat tighter around himself and let his head fall back against the house. His phone began to ring in his pocket. The hospital. "Damn. Sorry, Dad. I told them not to call me." "Hey, you made it through lunch and presents. No one's gonna hold it against you if you have leave now." He smiled his thanks at his dad as he answered the phone. "Dr. O'Grady." "I'm sorry to disturb you, Dr. O'Grady." Noah sat up in his chair. "Dr. Smith, what's wrong?" His new partner. "Nothing yet, but the staff just received a phone call from Tabitha Jones and she said her sister was in natural labor with twins. One of which is breech. I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable attempting a natural labor with a multiple birth. If she wants a C-section, I can?" Noah's heart pounded in his chest. "Samantha. No. She's quite set on a natural labor, so I'll come in now." "Did Tabitha say how dilated she was?" Knowing Tabitha, she would be checking. "About 6 centimeters at last check." "That's great. I'll see you in half an hour. This is one you'll want to see. They hung up and Noah made his excuses and ran out the door. He may be seeing Tabitha sooner than he'd planned. Chapter 9. Just breathe, Sam. That's all you need to do at the moment. Breathe and don't let the panic consume you. Sam squeezed her hand tighter as she blew out more deep breaths. Sam hadn't let go of Tabitha's hand in almost 2 hours, and it was getting more numb by the moment. They'd finally arrived at the hospital. John had driven his precious cargo slower than usual because of the road conditions. Okay, you go in with John and I'll bring your bags in. No. I want you. Art, all right. But you need to let up on my hand a bit. Sam let go in one move and Tabitha gasped at the throbbing pain the blood restoration brought. I'm going to get a wheelchair and then we're going inside, okay? She jumped out of the car and met the staff at the door as they wheeled a chair out. It took just a few minutes to get her into the chair and into an exam room, but by the time they did, Samantha's skirts were soaked and she was yelling. I think I just wet myself. Tabitha couldn't stop laughing, the absurdity of the situation bubbling inside her like a pot of oil. Your water broke, which is a good thing. The babies will be here soon. Listen to her, she knows what she's talking about. Noah's voice burst into the room and Tabitha swung around. Noah? Hay smiled at her in the way she'd been dreaming about. Like he missed her and didn't hate her as she'd feared. Tabitha. I see you've brought me my patient. Are you staying for the birth? Tabitha's heart fluttered in her chest, heat racing into her cheeks and her belly at the sight of her handsome doctor. That wasn't the original plan, but... She's not going anywhere. I need her, Sam insisted from behind them. Tabitha somehow managed to drag her gaze away from Noah's handsome face and attend her sister. I'll stay if you want me to. But what about John? John came running into the room with 3 bags and a bundle of nervous energy that was like a rock tossed into their calm pool. What about John? He repeated. My sister wants me to stay for the birth. Are you okay with that? He nodded rapidly and set down the bags. Of course. Whatever she wants is fine by me. Tabitha saw Noah look at John with a surprised expression and she grinned. Yeah, my sister chose well. Didn't she? Noah nodded. I think so. Noah O'Grady, he said, extending his hand and introducing himself to John. Tabitha felt the need to add something while she watched them. John works too much too, so you two have a lot in common. The difference is that Sam is super supportive and I'm not. Not yet. Noah came forward and started to say something, but Sam screamed out, Can you two just leave your shit alone for 2 minutes? I need some help down here. Please. Tabitha rushed to kneel down next to her sister and grabbed her hand. All right, Samantha, let's see how far along you are. Noah began his examination, and Tabitha concentrated solely on her sister for the next 3 hours. Sam was everything a pregnant woman could be. Loud and angry, tired and serene. Perfect in every way. At 11 o'clock, her beautiful sister pushed 2 amazing babies into the world. 1 little boy and 1 little girl. Both small but screamingly healthy. Oh my God. They're so beautiful. Tabitha's heart had never been so full as when she gazed down at her sister. Naked, sweaty, and covered with the squirming flesh of her 2 infant children. Noah, thank you so much. Noah stepped away and smiled as he pulled off his gloves. How about we leave the new family to bond, and the nurses will help you with anything else you need. Congratulations to you both. Tabitha followed the cue and dragged herself away from her new family, in order to let John step in and kiss his wife and adore the babies he'd created. When they made it into the hallway, Tabitha threw herself at Noah for the tightest hug imaginable. Thank you so much for everything you just did. She knew the statistics on births, especially multiple births, and what Noah had just achieved with her sister was nothing short of miraculous. Noah squeezed her back and she sagged against him. God, she'd miss the smell of him. The warmth. The sound of his laugh. Merry Christmas, Tabitha. She pulled back and smiled up at him. Merry Christmas, Noah. She took a deep breath. There is so much I need to tell you, to apologize for. But I don't know if this is the best time. She glanced around at the staff in the hallway. How about we talk in my office? Noah took her hand and led her into his office. The place they'd first met. Her hand tingled where he touched her, and the butterflies in her stomach had once again taken wing. It was so good of you to come in for Sam. The doctor on rotation told us that you had Christmas off. Which had surprised the hell out of her, and in her panic, she'd asked the man to call him. I'm sorry if we pulled you away from your family. They sat down in the two patients' chairs, facing each other, still holding hands. The fact that Noah didn't seem to want to let her go was a great sign for her, and it pushed aside some of the fears that had consumed her for weeks. No. I was glad you called. I wouldn't have missed it. You're such a good doctor, and I'm so sorry for the things I said that day on the phone. I'm ashamed of myself, if I'm honest. She dropped her head and focused on his skilled hands, still slightly white from the powdered latex gloves. No, stop please. You don't need to be sorry. I'm the one who didn't listen to you, or communicate the way I should have. After all these years of training, you'd think I'd be better at talking to women. He smiled at his own joke, and she couldn't stop herself from reaching out to cup his jaw. Can we start again? I mean, will you forgive me for being so ungrateful, thoughtless? Noah pressed his lips to hers. Softly, passionately. Until she couldn't think about anything other than gripping his scrub top and pulling him in tightly to her. But the door opened and a voice said, Dr. O'Grady, we need you. Tabitha pulled away and smiled up at the regretful look Noah was giving her. I'm sorry Oh, trust me, after that miraculous birth I just witnessed, I'd say you have a pass to run out on me in any situation for the next decade or so. Noah laughed, his beautiful hearty laugh that she'd missed so much. Great. He kissed her quickly in front of the other doctor and ran back to his patients. Tabitha pressed her fingertips to her lips, absorbing the heat of his mouth and sighing at the Christmas magic that had truly been performed today. She wandered back to her sister and then called an Uber. It was a new day, a new world. But there was one more tiny thing she needed to take care of. Dr. O'Grady, your next patient is here. Noah lifted his head from his notes. He hadn't been expecting anyone for another hour. All right. Show them in. Tabitha stuck her head in and waved, and happiness struck his heart. God, she was beautiful. I hope I'm not disturbing you, she said as she stepped into the room, her face shining with a health he couldn't explain. Christmas had obviously done her a world of good. I was just popping in to see my sister and thought I'd say hi. He got up and went around his desk, taking her in his arms and kissing her. She didn't fight him, quite the opposite in fact. She came into his arms with a smile and kissed him with an answering moan. They were definitely back on track. Your sister's doing great. They can all go home in 2 or 3 days. Thanks for looking after them so well. He shrugged, holding her close. Her warmth made him crave home, his bed sleep. He'd missed her more than he'd realized. Who was the physician who was working here yesterday? A floater, she asked. Sort of. He drew her down to sit on the patient's chairs as he had the night before. He'd put a few things into action and he hoped she'd be happy with the changes. He's my new partner. I made him an offer 2 weeks ago and he accepted. Your new partner? Her eyebrows rose and he could see the intelligence behind her clever eyes. Yes, it was your suggestion after all, he reminded her. My suggestion? You mean you? She trailed off and he waited for her to finish. But instead her breathing rate had increased and she wasn't speaking at all. Continue. She swallowed hard, her throat working up and down. You mean you added another doctor to do alternate shifts for you? Yes? He enjoyed the strange mix of emotions flittering across her face. Why? She glanced down and then up in his eyes again. He grinned, letting the happiness he'd been waiting for 3 weeks now fill up his chest. He'd made these changes for her and he wanted her to know it. So that I could have a life with you if you'd still like that. Oh yes, I do. Very much. She reached over and grabbed his hands. I thought you'd never forgive me for wanting you to change your work. He shook his head. Looking back, he saw how frustrating it all must have been for her. No, you were right to complain, and I can't guarantee I'll never run off in the middle of a date again. Oh, I don't expect, she interrupted. But this makes everything much easier, you were right about that. We can go on short vacations, I can have nights off and not be on call. It may take a year or so to get him up to speed with the way I do things, for instance, birthing twins naturally. He's young but he'll learn quickly. She smiled brightly and nodded, her breath catching in an unusual way. But long term, I think this will be great. For me, my patients, and us. She tightened her grip on his hand. So, you want to get back together? He nodded. Yes. Very much. I've missed you more than I can describe. She looked down again and worry gripped his heart. Was he too late to try to fix this? No, it couldn't be that. Her kisses had said too much of how much she'd missed him too. Or had he been mistaken with that? What is it, Tabitha? What's wrong? Nothing. Do you have time to chat for a bit longer? Noah glanced at the door, once again feeling the odd tug between personal and business. I'd love to, but Cheryl said I had another patient. Maybe I should let her know we need a bit longer. He pushed to stand up and Tabitha laughed. No. No. Your next patient is me. Oh, was that how you managed to see me? You don't need to do that. How adorable was she? No. I need an obstetrician and I was hoping you could fit me into your schedule. What? He couldn't have heard that correctly. I'm pregnant. How? She giggled nervously, pulling her hand away to wring her fingers in her lap. Well, to be honest, I haven't had the pregnancy confirmed, but I've done a stick test, had no period for 7 weeks, and have been fairly sick every morning for a week or so. Oh my God. He had no idea what to say. He hadn't been expecting anything like this. Not that it was unwelcome, but... Are you angry? Because honestly, this wasn't planned, and I never ever want to trap you. So I don't want you to feel like I did this on purpose. Or that you have to be with me because of it. But I had to be honest with you. Noah reached across the space between them and pulled her onto his lap. Come here, you beautiful girl. She came and shuddered a little, as though she was suppressing tears. I can't imagine how scared you've been, or what you've gone through the last few weeks. I'm so sorry. He dealt with enough single mothers to know how terrifying the prospect of raising a child alone could be. No. She couldn't speak, so he simply put his arms around her and shushed her. You don't need to explain anything. So how about we get the ultrasound machine out and have a look at our baby? What do you think about that? Her head popped up from where it had rested on his shoulder. Seriously? Of course. I can't let you hire me as your obstetrician, obviously. But as the mother of my child, we can share this together. She nodded and grabbed for a tissue off my desk. Come lie down. He directed her to the table he'd seen thousands of patients on before. His breath shuddered in his throat as he pulled over the machine and got the equipment ready, just as he had 1,000 times before. Are you okay? She asked him, and a surprised laugh burst from his throat. This is the first time I'm going to see a child of mine on this machine. It's surreal. She smiled as she pulled up her top and he placed the probe low on her belly. At 7 weeks it would be safer to do an internal ultrasound, but if he was lucky he should be able to see. There, look. He froze the image and there before them was a white little jelly bean with a rapid heart rate beating wildly. That's the baby, she whispered into the room. He turned and bent to kiss her lips. That's our baby. And with that kiss and those few words, they began their new lives together.